All right, welcome in person and in Zoom. So hopefully you got this email or so today we're starting Python 201. If you've participated in the Python 101 or 102 tutorials, those are you'll know that they're available here on the KIMEP Data Science Lab Moodle page. If you registered in the Google Forms, then as of like 2 hours ago, I've added you to the Moodle, so you have access if you registered with a KIMEP email address. If you don't have a KIMEP email address or you used your Gmail, then I was not able to add you to the Moodle. And then in that case, you can go back in the Google, you can go back and fill out the form again and add your KIMEP email address, and I'll register you. If you don't have a KIMEP email address, the materials are available here on the YouTube channel and also our GitHub. So the GitHub is here. This is my personal GitHub, but you can follow this, the link here to the KIMEP Data Science Lab, where all of the code, the exact same code is up on the GitHub as is on the Moodle. So, but I want to kind of go over this briefly, just so you know what resources are available. So on the KIMEP Data Science Lab Moodle, we have software and installation and troubleshooting. So if you're joining us for the first time, I encourage you to go through this and make sure you've installed Python on your computer and install Jupyter Notebooks, because all of the exercises in the code and the skills tests are all in Jupyter Notebooks. Jupyter Notebooks can be a little tricky to install sometimes, so we've got some links up here for troubleshooting. And then, so on the Moodle, you'll see the code and session videos, links to YouTube videos and old skills tests for Python 101. This was this kind of basic introduction to Python, data structures, control structures like if statements and for loops and while loops and simple kind of beginning, like intro to Python. And then these last 5 weeks, we looked at kind of functions and algorithms and classes and objects and more kind of advanced stuff in Python. So and the skills test. Also, for those of you who just took the skills test, I've updated the I have the without solutions if you want to practice it, and I also have I've uploaded the solutions from the last skills test, so you can look at those if you plan to take the 102 skills test again in the future. I also uploaded so we have three versions of the 101 skills test now as well, and I've also updated the solutions there. So so here with Python 201, we're stepping away from Python in general, and we're looking at the Pandas module specifically, and we're focusing primarily on data analytics. So Python 101 and 102 were very general, right? Very general, like programming, like computer programming. But 201 focuses specifically on manipulating data frames and the basic like data analytics. So let me introduce kind of what the basic schedule is going to be. So for the next 5 weeks, session 1, which is today, we'll cover data frame basics, the data frame object or class and series. These are the two kind of primary data types that are used in Pandas. We'll look at how to select and drop rows and columns. We'll look at how to read and write data frames from and to Excel files. And then in session 2, we'll get into sorting and grouping. We'll use the sort values function, the group by function, the ag function to calculate statistics, aggregate statistics on groups. We'll look at drop duplicates, how to handle duplicates. Session 3 is all about merging. So we'll have two data frames. We'll be merging them. We'll choose which fields to join on. We'll talk about what the different types of joins are: left joins, right joins, inner joins, outer joins. We'll talk about how do you label your columns when you join tables if they have identical columns. And at the end of session 3, this is in 3 weeks, we'll offer the Python 101 skills test. So if you want to take the Python 101 skills test, that's in 3 weeks. And then the 4th session, we'll talk about editing data. So parsing, cleaning, changing the data type, coding, like coding the data, encoding it, for example, like you have male and female, and then you want to code it as like 1 or 0 or something like this, for like numeric coding of data. We'll talk about the apply function, which is a really useful function for doing non-standard manipulations on rows, the apply function and the row-based lambda function. And if you took Python 101, you'll remember we used the lambda function inside of the sort function. This is the same idea, right? But so we'll cover that. And then we'll have the Python 102 skills test if you want to take that. That's in week 4. So I'm kind of staggering the skills test because I don't want to get to week 5 and then you want to take like 101, 102, and 201 all in the same, right? It'd be like a marathon. So we're just going to stagger them out. And then for session 5, we'll do some time series exercise. So we'll take this data and then we'll kind of structure it in a particular way, like to kind of combine all of the different skills that we've learned to create a time series, which we could then export and visualize, in Excel or R or whatever else, Python, Matplotlib maybe. And we'll also have the Python 201 skills test. So that's the general schedule. Let me introduce the data set that we'll be using. So here in Jupyter Notebooks, on the GitHub, I'm using this Python 201 folder, and I've got 2 files. These are the same files I've uploaded to the session code here on the Moodle. So if you open up the Moodle session code, did I not just? Oh, no, that's 202, sorry. 201 data analytics. So session code here for Python 201. We have 2 files. We have the code for session 1, which is this Jupyter Notebooks code folder, and then we have an Excel file, Hotel Analytics. So we'll be using this file, Hotel Analytics, for all 5 weeks, all 5 sessions. This is actually a data set which was provided to us this last spring when the Data Science Lab did a project with PwC's data science team. They came to KIMEP, they gave us this file, and it was a kind of a data wrangling challenge. And that was a lot of fun. And the students who participated in that took this data set and did some analysis and found some really interesting, they found some problems with this particular hotel. And they made a data dashboard, and they made a presentation to our colleagues at PwC, and it was a great experience. But we also realized it would be a great data set to kind of practice our data wrangling skills on in this tutorial. So this is going to be our primary text for these next 5 sessions. So let me introduce the Hotel Analytics data set to you first. Here's the Excel file. So if you look at the sheets down at the bottom, there are 2 main sheets, plans and actuals. Now, merge and plans reshaped, these are sheets that I've added that we'll be manipulating at various times. So the initial data set did not have these extra sheets, merge and reshaped. So we're just looking at plans and actuals. And the general idea is that these are the 2019 revenue plans for a hotel, which has 6 types of rooms. So it's a very large hotel, which has 6 categories of rooms. You'll notice the Club Deluxe King Room, the Executive Suite, the King Suite, the 1-bedroom club room, the 1-bedroom suite, the Superior King Room, and yeah, so these are the 6 types of rooms. And for each type of room, there are 3, so you have the number of rooms, right? This number is constant throughout the year. So there are, 28 Club Deluxe King rooms, 10 1-bedroom club rooms, whatnot. So you see the number of rooms. Then you see sum of revenue total, sum of revenue rooms, sum of revenue food, sum of revenue bar. So this hotel is making their revenue plan based on 3 revenue streams. The first is the revenue room. That's the room reservation. So that's the basic, if you're reserving the room, you have to pay that. And then they have 2 additional sources of revenue per room, which is food and bar. And then these 3, if you add them up, should be the sum of revenue total. Right? So that's the plan. And then they also have, they've also calculated the average occupancy and the average ADR, which is the average daily rate. So that was calculated. I think that's also part of the plan. So this is their revenue plan for the 12 months of 2019 for each of these 6 types of rooms. Right? So that's the plan. And then the next sheet down here, actuals, is the actual room reservation data. Right? So this is plans are the plans, actuals are the actual reservations. So each visit has an ID. It has the month, the room ID and the room type, the room price, some loyalty status, the actual days stayed, right? So the room revenue here, for example, 450, that's a simple calculation of the room price times actual days stayed, right? So 150 per day times 3 is 450. So we're not doing anything, super fancy, right? And then they have the revenue food and the revenue for beverages and the revenue total. So that's right. Those correspond to the 3 revenue streams we talked about in the plan. And if there was a concern about the room, then this concern is coded as 1. If not, it's 0. And if there was a concern, the concern description, they have been are typed. So they've already kind of organize these concern descriptions into, like, I think it was 7 or 8 different, maybe 9 different types. So, and then they have the type of the concern. So bad smells in this case. And then this data set has, I don't know, several thousand, maybe about 14 or 15,000 reservations over the course of a year, right? Yeah, about 13,500 reservations. So the task that PwC gave us was look at the revenue plan, compare it to the actuals, and see and identify any flags. That's the first goal. Identify any flags. Are there any instances where the actuals failed to meet the plan? And our criteria for flagging anomalies is 90%. So if the actuals are anywhere less than 90% of the plan, then flag it. Okay. So if it's like 95% of the plan, that's within our margin of error. But if it's below 90%, right, of the plan, flag it. That's the first priority. And flagging it could be, is it the room type? Is it in which month and which revenue stream, right? It could be. And then the second task is, once you've flagged these issues, or see if you can diagnose it, right? Try to diagnose it. We have the concerns, right? We can kind of look at these trends over time, and just using this data, can we diagnose where the problem is, when the problem is, and some idea of what the problem might have been, right? So that's the task. So over these next 5 weeks, we'll do those kind of step by step. Okay. So, okay, so that's the data set. Now let's get into the Python. So here's my session 1 code. So step 1 is to examine and format the Excel file. So first of all, to start, I need to import pandas. And I'm gonna do this with the import pandas command, but I'm gonna use this as PD. So I don't think we talked about this before in the earlier tutorials. If you use the as operator in Python, this PD is just a shortcut that you define, right? And why would you need that? Well, sometimes you want to call a function from the module itself, right? And in that case, it would be like pandas dot whatever would be the name of the function that you're calling, right? But maybe you don't want to write out pandas dot something every time, right? So if you use this alias, this as PD, when you call a function, now you can, if you want to call a pandas function, now you just type PD dot whatever. So it's just a way to alias the module, which is helpful, especially for modules that have really long and, you know, case sensitive, like really long and weird names. So, okay, so I'll just call this, I mean, I could call it like, you know, pan or pa or p, whatever, but I'll just call it panda as PD. Okay, and then immediately, right, you can see I'm going to use this PD right here, right? So plans equals PD.readExcel. So this read Excel, pandas is fantastic. One of the things that pandas is great at is interacting with Excel files. Okay, so read underscore Excel. This is a pandas library function for grabbing an Excel file and opening, importing it into Python as a data frame object. Okay, so pd.readExcel. Here's the name of the file. I don't need any path because my file is in the same folder as the script, but if it was in a different folder, I'd need a path in front there, right? And also recall that this data file, this Excel file has several sheets at the bottom, right? It has plans, actuals, merge, plans, reshape. Today I'm only going to deal with the plans sheet, okay? So to identify that in pandas, here, this read Excel function has a parameter called sheet name, and you write the name of the sheet, right? So the name of the sheet is plans, and then, so I'm reading in just that one sheet that I looked at, the plans, which is this sheet here, right? And so this function is going to read in that sheet as a data frame object, which is a data type in pandas, and I want to save that as plans. So I'm going to run this. Okay, and now if I run plans, just run it. There's that's that whole sheet. And you notice there's a lot of like NaNs, and unnames. It's really messy because here, right? First of all, so this first whole column is missing data, right? It's just an empty column. So you can see here, this unnamed 0, the whole thing is NaNs. So this NaN is just like a missing values thing. And then you can see that the 2019 revenue plan is up here in the header. That was this value here, right? So you can tell that the default for this function, this read Excel has here header the default is 0 for header, for the header parameter, which means it's going to take it assumes that the first row is the header of the data set. Okay. So if you don't want that, then you can use none. So look, if we here, the default is header is 0, right? And it's taken the first row as headers. If I say none, like this, and then run it, okay, now it's assigned indexes for the column IDs and this 2019 revenue plan. Now that first row is actually in the first row of data, right? So it depends. Like sometimes you'll have a data set where you have headers at the top and you want it to take the header. Sometimes your data will just start straight up from row 1 with no headers, right? So that's always something when you're importing, you have to decide, like, does my data have headers or not? Right? And this is how you kind of handle that. So for me though, I'm gonna get rid of this stuff anyways, so it's not a big deal. Okay, but this is really messy, right? Because there's a lot of like white space here, a lot of missing values. So like, I don't like this column, I don't like these rows, right? This spreadsheet, the plans sheet, is great for the human eyes, to kind of scan over, and it's like color formatted and all that great stuff, right? This is like not necessary, and it's kind of cumbersome and inconvenient when you're importing this into Excel. So this is not well-structured data from the perspective of like data analytics, right? There's too much like formatting going on here. So what I'm going to do is I never mess with my original data. You never format your original data. You just leave it alone, right? But what I will do is I will copy this sheet, and then in plans reshaped, I'm just going to paste. So in the plans reshaped tab, I've just copied this. I'm not going to touch this. I'm not going to mess with it, right? But in plans reshaped, I'm going to start reformatting this document to make it easier or like more convenient for Excel, right? So first of all, I don't need these rows. I'm going to delete those. Second of all, so I've also got these headers here, right? The Club Deluxe King Room, Executive Suite, King Suite. If I read these into into Pandas, right, it's going to treat each of these like a row of data, which is not. It's just like a header, right? So what I want to do is move these off to the side. So I do need this data I do need to know that this is King Club Deluxe Room, but I'm just going to move it to the side here and then drag it down, right? And then for Executive Suite, I'm going to do the same thing. Drag it down. For King Suite, I'm going to drag it to the side, drag it down. So we're kind of reshaping the data a little bit. We'll do more reshaping later. Okay, so I've done that. I don't need these rows, but I'll take care of those later. Okay, now I also don't need, yeah. So now I'm going to call this room type. Okay. And here, instead of row labels, I'm going to call this room stats. And then this January, February, that's fine. And the total, that's fine. So I'll just leave that. Okay, so now the data is a little bit more ready to import. So I'm going to save that. And now I'm going to go back into Pandas. So I'm going to read plan reshaped into into a Pandas data frame. So here I'm going to read it again, hotel analytics, but now I've changed the sheet name to plans reshaped, right? The reshaped one. And did I need any other? Okay, do I have a header? Do I want this as my header? Yeah, I want that as my header. So the default is, sorry, this is above. The default is header equals 0, which is my first row, right? So that's fine. So it's going to take the first row as the header. Yeah, question, is it possible to use Pandas to reshape the data? Yes, we will be reshaping the data a lot in Pandas. Today, just to get us started, I'm doing a little bit by hand. But for the most part, like the reshaping that we'll do for the next 5 weeks will actually be in Pandas. Yeah, thanks for that question. Okay, so I run this, and okay, now it's a little bit better. So now at least my columns are what I want them to be, right? Room type, room stats, January, February, right over to total. And I've still got these like empty rows that I don't like. But at least like things are starting to look a little better. I also don't like that this float is giving me scientific notation, right? That's really annoying because most of these values are integers, although some of them are decimals, right? So that's a little bit problematic because that means the data types, right? The way that they created this table, the data types are actually different, right? Like some of in one column you have integers as well as decimals, right? But okay, let's go. And just to double check, I just want to show you if I do type of plans, what is that? So plans that's a Pandas core frame data frame, right? So this is a data frame object that we're dealing with now, just so we know. Okay, so first thing I want to do is change these the data types of each column, right? So what should the data types, and I should say, if you look at the read Excel, we have the sheet name, we have the header, we also have names here, which is if you want to like rename the column names, and we'll take advantage of this in the future. We also have D type, right? So D type, this is data type. So if you look down a little bit. So data type is a type name or a dictionary of column to the type default none. So this is the data type for the data or the columns, right? And you can say like float or integer or whatever. And you can actually create a dictionary for each column, telling it what, like each column name, where the column name is the key, and then the data type that you want that column to be is the value. So let me let's do that. So first of all, to do this, I'm going to just create a not a dictionary, but I'm going to create a list where this is plans D type, and I defined a list where this is the data type that I want each column to be, right? So the first column, I want the first two columns. What should the first two columns be? Strings, right? It's just words. And then for January through December, and total, like what data types do I want here? Yeah. And you can't really, they let you choose the data type per column, but they're not going to let you you have to pick one or the other, right? So for now, I'm just going to pick integer. Okay, we'll go back, we'll be more accurate later, but for now, I'm just going to choose integer. So how many columns do I have? I have 2 plus 12 plus total, right? So I've got 2 columns of strings, and then I've got 13 columns of what I'm going to code or cast as integers. So I have to add one more here. Okay, so here's my 2 strings, and here are my 13 integers. Okay, so I run that, and now let me show you the here columns. So what's the data type of plans? It's a data frame, right? And so if I do data plans dot columns, what am I calling here? What is columns? Yeah, it's column names, but remember this is plans is a class, right? I mean, it's a class data frame. It's an object from the class data frame, and that class has several attributes, right? So one of those attributes of the data frame that you can call is columns. Right? So this is not a function, it's an attribute. Remember, if you took Python 102, right, you could call a function from a class, or you can also call an attribute from a class. So one of the attributes from the data frame class is columns. And what does that return? It returns an index object containing a list of all the column names. So if we run this, it should update, right? And then you can cast that as a list. So I take this plans.columns, I'm going to cast it as a list and save that as plans calls, right? And now I've got the list of the column names, right? Let me show you one other, just I could have showed this to you before. Let me show you one other attribute, which is fun to look at, is shape. So if you look at plans.shape, this gives you it's 55 by 15. That gives you the number of rows and the number of columns in the data frame, right? So often, like I'll often use plans shape after I manipulate the data frame. See, I'm removing rows, or I'm deleting rows, or adding rows, or comparing two versions of, and I'll just run the I'll run the shape really quick just to see, okay, did it actually delete the column I wanted? Did it actually add the rows I wanted? So this is the number of rows, and we know that it has 15 columns, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah. Okay, 55 rows. So, okay, so here I've got a list of the data types, and I've got a list of the column names. Now I have to make that into a dictionary. So I'm just going to use a dictionary comprehension here in a very ugly non-Python-ish way. I'm going to index. So I'm going to create an index, which is the length of over the range from 0 to the length of that list, right? And then basically for each element of the dictionary, the key is going to be the column name, and the value is going to be the data type, right? So this is just kind of a very esoteric way of creating a dictionary. This is what the dictionary needs to look like. Right? So the key has to be the column name, and then the value has to be the data type of that column. Right? So you could have just manually done this, right? But I just did it like this because you can use the plans.columns to get the column names. So okay, anyways, now that we've got this dictionary, you can, in the read Excel file, in the PD read Excel function, we can add this parameter dtype equals, and then we input that dictionary, right? And if you do that, I know it's a lot of extra work, but oops, especially when it doesn't work. What's wrong? I think it doesn't like these empty rows, so I'm gonna have to. I don't want to sort these. Okay, I think it doesn't like these empty rows, so I'm just gonna delete these. I would do this in pandas a different way. I was going to show you that afterwards, but I'll show you that later. Okay, so this should be fine. Still not. What's wrong? All these empty spaces. it doesn't, I mean, I'm going to delete this column in a second anyways, but. Okay, so, or I could have just changed them all to, code them all to numbers. So let's see. Okay, so it didn't like the empty spaces, but it's done. Okay, and if I run plans, now I've got integers, right? It looks much cleaner, right? I don't have any like empty white spaces. I've got the column names are exactly what I want them to be, right? What if I want to rename these months, right? So what if I want to change the column names? So here, I have the column names here, right? If you want to change the column names, so we know that this is the attribute plan columns. If you set this equal to something, another list, right? You can, it will change the column names for you, right, if you like. So right now, I don't know. I mean, I kind of like these column names, but suppose you wanted to change these to like, okay, all right, I'll have to help you with that afterwards. Right. So if you want to change the column names, this is an easy way to do it. So you just have the list and then columns. Oops, with the S. Okay. So you can directly change that attribute, right? And now if we open plans, it's updated the column names, right? So that's an easy way to update. This is if you want to update all the columns all at once, right? Well, I'll show you a way to do this later, just like one by one. But okay, so we've got our basic data set in here now. Let's explore a series. So what's a series? In Python Pandas, each column is saved as a series, as a data type called series with a capital S. Okay, so if you and you can call that. So there are a couple of ways that you can call a column. You can index it, right? So if you do 0, let's see, this will give you. So because the data frame has like rows and columns, right? If you want a specific row or a specific column, you can index it just like you would a list or an array, right? So with this colon, so if I do this, it should just give me everything, right? But if you just want the first column, it would be, you leave the left side blank, and that's going to give you all the rows, and then you can index which column you want by the number, and that should give you room type. Oops. Yeah. Sorry. Very good. Okay, can do it. Okay, so I always just do the column name. So, okay, so room type, first of all, you can just do the column name like this. So if you if you type in the column name, it'll give you that. Another way to do it is just type in the name of the column, like dot, and type in the column name, room type, just like this. So both of these are valid. Here you're kind of indexing, you're using the square brackets to kind of index what you want, right? Here you're actually calling the column, you're calling this the series object. Right? So this kind of creates some confusion in Pandas because there are like multiple ways to access columns and rows. You can access columns through the series, through the name of the series, which is the name of the column, or you can index it as an array, like with the square brackets. Right? So first I'm going to show you series, and then we'll kind of, when we get into like rows and yeah, Yevgeny, I'm going to have to help you with that afterwards, okay? Yeah, so here, plan room type. If you look at the type, it's a pandas object, but it's called a series. Okay? And then series also have several attributes and functions that you can run on them. And this is where it gets a little bit confusing too, because some of the functions that work on the data frame object don't work on the series object, or some of the functions that work on the series object don't work on the data frame. So you have to be like, if you're only trying to manipulate like the values of a particular column, right? You can call that column, and that's a series object, and now you can call some certain functions on that, such as values here. Like values will give you, so plans.roomType.values, that's a function on the series room type, and that will give you the values. You can do like, as type to change it. You can do string. You can do, there are a lot of like different attributes or functions that you can call on the series. But if you, so values gives you this, right? But if you try that same thing, oh, so that gives you values as well, but it gives them in an array format. Right? So, and then you can also use this unique. So the unique function on a series will give you the unique items, right? So here we have if you run the values of room type, you get including all the duplicates, right? So you get like 5 or 6 or 7 versions of like Club Deluxe King Room, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, Executive Suite 7 times. But if you run unique, then it'll give you the unique values, right? So this is helpful when you just want to know like what's the set of unique values in this column without duplicates, right? So this is just an example. There are all kinds of functions and attributes you can run on series, right, which are different from what you can run on the data frame. So, okay, just so we're kind of aware of that. Okay, so let's start manipulating. I think one of the basic things, tasks in when you're dealing with data, right? You're gonna sort, you're gonna group, you're gonna join, right? But some of the basic tasks are selecting based on certain criteria. Selecting rows, how do you select a subset of rows? How do you select a subset of columns? How do you select a subset of rows and columns at the same time, right? And then how do you add or drop rows or columns? So that's what we're going to cover for the rest of today. And again, it can be a little bit irregular because there can be like 2 or 3, there are more than one ways to do this sometimes in Pandas. So let's start here, like 5 different tasks I want to do. So first, let's select some rows by name, by list of names, and by values. So firstly, let's say we just want to look at the rows containing where the room is Club Deluxe King Room, okay? So we just want to isolate the Club Deluxe King Room statistics. So here, here you can do the bracket notation for the array, and then you can indicate the logical criteria, right? So whatever you put in these brackets, it's either going to be some numbers to index it, or it's going to be a logical statement, right? I mean, it's going to be a Boolean list, right? Which includes true or false for everything that you want. So you need a Boolean statement that's going to be true for the rows that you want and false for the rows that you don't want. So how do we make a list of a Boolean list with true whenever the room type is Club Deluxe King Room and false when it's not? Okay. So to do that, we're going to take the series plans.room type. Okay. And we want this to be, so right? So this is the general idea. This is not going to work, but this is the general idea. Oh, there we go. They work, yeah. Right. So okay, so here plans room type equals Club Deluxe King Room, right? So this series, how many values are in this series? Plans.room type. How many rows?
6.
No. I don't mean unique values. I mean total values. So there's 6 or 7 unique values in there, but how many rows are there total? So let's look at plans.shape, right? 49 and 15. So there are 49 rows. Right? So this statement needs to have 49 values. It needs to be a list of 49 Boolean values where it's true when the room type is Club Deluxe King Room and it's false when it's not. Okay. So let me just take this and show you plans.room type. That's a list of 49, right? It has 49 elements in it. And now if I do this Club Deluxe King Room equals, that's going to do a Boolean test on every single item in that series, and it's either going to return true or false, right? So now it's a list of 49, it's a list of 49 Boolean variables, and you can see these first 7 are true, right? So that's what you're entering in here. Sometimes, like, you could just look at the notation and not really understand what's going on here, right? You could think like, oh yeah, I want room type when it equals this, but I think to really understand how to use Python and to really understand this is true in R, it's true in a lot of programming languages when you're doing data analytics, what you're actually doing is with this square bracket notation, you're indexing rows, right? So you either need to put in like the numbers of the rows, or you need to put in a list, a Boolean list with a value true for the rows that you want and or the value false for the ones that you don't, right? So this is how we get this list of 49 values, right? Plans room type equals this, and then it gives us the rows that we want. So let me show you another way to index that. Right, we could also just do plans, which are the rows that we want. If you look at so the Club Deluxe King Room is row 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So you could also index 0 through 6, I believe, right? But notice that, so that also gave us what we want. This is the, again, it's this array indexing notation that we've seen before with Python list, right? But notice that this 0:6, which indices does 0:6 give us? 0 to what? 0 to 5, right? If we want that sixth row, then we need to index 0 to 7. Yeah. Okay. So this is one way how to get the rows that you want, is to manually index the row, but the row ID, right? And then the other way to get it is by using that list of Boolean, right? That list has to be the same length as the data frame. Otherwise, it'll kick out an error, right? If you have like 49 rows of data and you give it a Boolean list of like 47, it'll say, mismatch, right? So it'll return an error. So this is these are two different ways you can select rows based on some kind of criteria. Okay, let's say, okay, I want to give you an exercise now. Select rows whose room type is this, or what's another room type? King Suite or executive King Suite. Yeah, let's do King Suite. Right. And the reason I'm doing King Suite and not Executive Suite is because they're not adjacent, right? So you want to pull out these these ones, the Club Deluxe ones, and you want to pull out these ones. Okay. So let me give you a minute to work on that one. So we have a solution. What do we think? So first of all, one thing I want to point out, and this is a really common mistake. I do it all the time because I get lazy, right? You know, and I know that room type is a column in the data frame plans, but Python doesn't know that, right? So a lot of times when this comes up in R and Python, it happens in both languages. When you're trying to select a subset of rows in a data frame, you usually have to list or write the name of the data frame twice, right? First, you have to list the name of the data frame that you're going to select the rows on, right? And then usually inside, when you're indicating this query, you have to write the name of the data frame again to choose the column that you're writing the query on, right? And sometimes this is another reason why like I like to keep the names of my data frames really short, because in the same line, sometimes you might have to refer to the data frame like multiple times, right? You don't want it to be like, you know, like PwC hotel analytics plans, right? And you have to like write that, you know, several times. So this is always like a little bit annoying, right? But okay, so plans dot room type equals this, or yeah. So this is one way. What was it? Executive suite? Or was it King suite? Okay, let's see if that works. Okay, it doesn't like that. So this is where like Pandas is a little touchy on, doesn't like that. It's a little touchy on Boolean. So you have to like massage it a little bit. Okay. That's super annoying, right? That's super annoying. Like, why does it not know? You know, why doesn't it just consider order of operations? If I've got the or there, do the thing on the left, do the thing on the right. So this is one place where Pandas is like not the best, right? Is when you have like multiple criteria. So let me show you how I would normally do this. I normally would not do it this way, but there's another way. Did anybody have a different solution? Huh? In, yeah. I prefer in because it's also scalable, right? So what I would prefer to do is make a list of like select rooms, right? And then I can put whatever rooms I want in here, right? What do I want? I want this and then King Suite, right? This is a much cleaner way to do stuff with Pandas, but also with Python in general, right? Rather than have like these kind of and, or, and, you know, kind of strung out like statements. Okay, so select rooms, and now I'm going to create the Boolean list. It'll be if plans room type is in, select rooms. Oops, or not. Wait. I did this like a week ago. Oh yeah, is in. Okay, so here too, like it doesn't like the in. Oops. So you can, there's actually like an is in function for the series, right? So this is in function. This is, again, this is like another example of where regular Python, like the in would be fine, right? But you know, Pandas and series are going to make you use their own notation to do the same thing, right? So here use this works for a series, and then if you use the is in function, and then you can put in a list here, and as long as the room type, each instance of the room type is in this list, right, then it'll return true. So you can see when we run that, we get, this is the block of true for the King Deluxe, right, the Club Deluxe, and then there's the block of false for the executives, and then here's the block of true for the King, right? So we take, so this is the criteria, right? And now we're going to put this inside of plans, right? And that gives us the Club Deluxe rooms and the King Suites, right? So we've seen like several ways to choose rows based on values. One is you can index, right? You can index numerically the rows that you want. or you can use the equals equals, right? Or you can also create a list and then use this is in. Yeah. And I think there's also a here, I wasn't expecting this to work. There's another one, I think it contains. The values. Well, I'm not gonna, there's another way to do it that I often do because I'm like leery of these of the simple like Boolean operators. Okay, so that's selecting some rows. Now let's select some columns. Let's say I only want room type and room stats and the month of April. Okay. So here, another way, I'm going to use this bracket, the square bracket again. But now instead of rows, I'm just going to use the columns that I want, right? And so you can, I showed you before, if you do like room type, you know, if you just do like one item, it'll give you that row, oh, sorry, that column. But if you want several columns, then you can make a list of columns and put that in, and it will recognize that as a list of column names. Right? So let's say I want the list, I want the column room type, room stats, and April, just those three columns, okay? So I can go here. And I'm gonna make another list. So this is another place where Pandas gets tricky, because sometimes you need these like lists inside of a list, right? And you'll this is also true for some of the Pandas functions, like sort values, drop duplicates, like drop rows, columns. Like you'll need sometimes you'll have to put like lists inside a list to make these things work. Okay, plan, room type. What's the other one I want? Room stats. And let's say I want April. Okay. So that gives me a subset by columns, right? Another clean way I like to do this, right? And this is kind of like the example above, is to pre-specify the columns that I want. So I'm going to select columns, right? I'm just going to make a list here. Right? I'm just going to break it into a couple of steps, and it's a little bit cleaner. So let's say I want April and I want like, you know, August, whatever. Okay, so I create this list, and now I can just insert that list like this. And I prefer to do it this way because this notation starts to get really messy, like especially if I'm adding other criteria in there for rows and columns at the same time, and this is like really messy. So I prefer to like kind of set up my criteria ahead of time as a separate list. You know, if it's the rows I want, then I'll set up this, right? And it's selecting the rows. And if it's the columns I want, I'll set it up like this. So, okay, so I've selected the columns I like. Okay. Now let's say I want to select rows and columns at the same time, right? So when I was selecting rows, like Club Deluxe King Room, I was getting all the columns, right? And here where I'm selecting the columns, I'm getting all the rows. Let's say I just want, April, right? I want room type, room stats, and April just for Club Deluxe King Room, okay? So now, this is where like, you're gonna have to start. This is where things get a little bit like more complicated. So you'd want to just do room type is in, and what was my list up here? Select rooms, right? Select rooms was Club Deluxe King Room and King Suite. Let me just copy this and go take it down. So let's say select rooms is, well, we can do these two. That's fine. And then let's say the select rooms and select columns is, I'll just copy this. Okay, oops. Okay, so this is the list of rooms I want, and this is the list of columns I want. Okay, I just set it up like this because I prefer to set these up separately before I go and actually call them. So plans room type is in select rooms, and comma select columns. Okay, but this is getting messy because if you want to choose rows and columns at the same time, now you have to use some notation here. Okay, so what did I do? Where'd it go? So there are two kinds of notations here. One is loc and one is iloc. Okay, so loc so what's the difference between loc and iloc? Location gets rows and or columns with particular labels, and iloc gets rows and or columns at integer locations. So sometimes if you're using indices like this, I mean, you can kind of look through this list, right? But so S here is the data frame. Okay. So this loc and iloc are things that you have to play around with sometimes when you're making complicated queries. If you're selecting rows, if you're only selecting rows, you don't need this. Or if you're only selecting columns, you don't need this. You only need these when you're selecting rows and columns at the same time. Right. And then the question is, how are you selecting? Are you using like numerical index, or are you using like these kind of lists like I'm using? So for example, right. So here, if you're, let's see which one I'm gonna. So I think iloc is for the, yeah, iloc is for index and loc is for the names. So let's try loc here. All right. So all we had to do was add, I mean, this thing is familiar, right? We did that already. That was what we used to select the rows, right? These King Suite and the Club Deluxe, right? And this thing was familiar. This is the list of columns that we wanted, the room type, room stats, April and August. Oops, I forgot to update that. But when we put these, when we called plans and then call these things by themselves, it returns an error, right? So it's just a weird thing about pandas. If you want to query rows and column subsets at the same time, you have to use this extra .loc or .iloc. Okay. I almost never use iloc because I don't like to reference when I'm doing data analytics, I'd never like to reference rows or columns by their numerical indices, right? Because those things can change, right? Your data set can change all the time. So it's better to have like clean labels and then do all your referencing by the labels So in case things shift around, you're still grabbing the rows and columns that you want. So I'm not very familiar with the iloc command, but loc I use all the time. So when selecting rows and columns at the same time, loc is with labels and iloc is with indices. Okay. So let me just update this. Okay, so we've got select rooms, select columns. Here we go. Okay, so let me give you, why don't you try, pulling out all of the revenue, sum of revenue food columns, right? For December. Let's see if, or let's pull out November and December and see if people ordered more food for Thanksgiving than for Christmas. So just pull up, I want you to pull up for all 6 rooms, pull up the sum of revenue food column, rows, and let's just look at November and December. Okay. So that should be 6 rows by 2 columns, or yeah, and then also, you can also keep the room type and room stats columns as well. So we got a solution. So sum of revenue food for November and December. So what are we going to do? Select columns. Okay. Okay. And then select. Oh, wait, I'll just call it select rows and then. Or wait, so say what again? Okay. How are you going to select the rooms? So we want the ones with where the room stats. So we want.
By ID.
What's that?
By ID.
We can do it by ID, but we want the ones where the room stats are. We just want the sum of revenue food. Right. So you want just. Okay. Where room stats equals. And select columns. Okay. All right. So that gave us our all 6 rooms. Just sum of revenue food for November and December, right? Okay. This just takes a lot of practice. Like when you're playing around with the data to figure out, like, I mean, a lot of data wrangling is just kind of visualizing it in your head and deciding what do you need to do. Okay, I need to grab these rows. Okay, what criteria, right? I mean, a lot of it's just the logic before you even do the coding. Sometimes if you jump into the coding too fast before you figure out the logic, then you're just gonna get lost, right? So kind of think, okay, what do I need to do? Okay, now in Pandas, how can I do that? Okay, so I want to show you that you can also, so far we've been selecting column names, selecting columns and selecting rows based on the entire name of the row or the column. But a lot of times you'll have repetition, repeating values or in the row names or the column names where, say you want to select rows or columns matching on a substring, right, of a row value or column label, right? So for example, let's look at here plans. Let's say I want to grab all the rows where room stats has the word sum, right? Because we have 3 sums. We have the sum of revenue total, the sum of revenue rooms, and the sum of revenue food. Oh, and the sum of revenue bar, right? So we've got 4. So let's say I want to grab those 4 rows and nothing else, right? So in that case, I don't want to type out, yeah, I could select row, I could make a list with like sum of revenue total, sum, right? But maybe wouldn't it be easier if I could just choose rows where the value for room stat just has the word sum in it, right? So you want to select rows by matching on a substring of a value in the column, right? So in that case, you can use two things. First of all, here's the series, right? Plans, room stats, that's the series. And then so let me show you the series first. We'll just build this up. So here's the series. And then you can do series string, and that'll give you the actual like string values of those and not the array. And then you can do the word this function contains, which allows you to test for a substring, right? And then you can put in the substring inside. And then if you do that, it's going to give you the Boolean. Oops. Sorry. So it's giving me trues wherever the substring, wherever this sum is contained. As long as sum is contained in the string for room stats, it'll return true, right? And then you can put that inside of plans here and use that as your criteria for the rows. And now I've got all the rows here are just sum of revenue, sum of revenue, sum of revenue, right? Okay. I can also do this for columns. So let's say I just want to grab the first, I'll just use the first two columns where the substring room is included in the column name. Okay. So here actually, we're not going to use a fancy function. Notice, I mean, for rows, this is actually quite a fancy function, right? You would have to know it's a series, and then you have to use a string option, and then you have to use a contains function on it. It's very esoteric, right? But like series has a few things like this, which are frequently used, right? So you can learn about these as the more you're playing with pandas. Not straightforward though. Okay, but if you want to select columns by matching on a substring, here you can do. We're going to do it. It's pretty similar to what we did earlier with the select columns, right? Where we just had like the list of columns. But so that's going to be the idea. But let's look at plans.columns, right? And these are the column names. So let's do select columns here, right? So now select columns is just the right. So that's everything, because select columns is just the list of all the columns, right? So, but if this is just a list of the columns that we want, then let's just create a list of the columns that we want, but not naming them specifically, right? So this is not a pandas thing. This is just a regular Python thing. You can just do a list comprehension, right? So we're going to do a list comprehension on the list of columns, right? This is the list of columns, and we're going to do a list comprehension for column in columns, right? We'll include it if what? So this list comprehension is going to, I use this all the time. So I'm showing you this code because it's a very useful code. Because a lot of times in your data set, maybe you've got like 5 variables from like 2020, like from 2000, you know, it's like whatever the variable name underscore 2000, and you've got like 5 more variables for 2005. It's like some variable name underscore 2005, right? And you just want to grab those 2000, the year 2000 variables or the year 2005 variables, and you don't want to have to like type out the actual variable names, right? You just want to select on that part of the name. So here we're going to go through each of these column names. For column in each of these, we're just going to return the column. We're not going to like change the column name.
So for one value of the columns, yes,
Mhm.
type
So we're just going to go through this list of column names, and then we're going to take each column name if what. So I only want to choose the ones where the string room is in the name of the column, right? How do I get the name of the column? Well, in this list comprehension, column here is the name of the column, right? I'm pulling them out one by one in this list comprehension. And if room is in column, then it will include it in this list comprehension. If it's not, it will exclude it. Okay? So I'm using a list comprehension here. If room in column. Okay. So I ran that, and then select calls should just be room type and room stats, right? And then now if I just, in Pandas, if I just put select calls in here, right, it's just going to give me those two columns. Right? So I think one of the things, today you're not going to learn like all of the different, like the lock and the iLock and all, dot string, dot contains, right? There's a lot of like esoteric stuff here. But what I do want to kind of convey to you is a certain flow. When you're working with Pandas, there's a certain flow, right? You build up your queries step by step, right? So if you're going to select some rows, first you build up the criteria, right, for the rows. And if you're choosing columns, you kind of build up these criteria for the columns. And then when it's all ready and clean, then you call it, right, you call it like the rows and the columns or whatever. So you kind of build them up. So you don't try to do all this stuff in one line, right? Because it gets like super messy. Otherwise these kind of queries just get like super long and messy, right? Just like build it up with very nice clean names, right? Okay. So that's choosing columns and rows based on subsets, substrings. All right. Last two tasks. Let's drop some columns. Okay, you've selected them. Now let's drop some. Okay. So I really don't like this total column at the end. I don't need that column. I can calculate it later if I want to, right? So let's just drop this total column. I don't like aggregated columns because I can just calculate those. I can do a query to calculate them if I need them. So it's not like raw data. So let's say I want to drop that column. So I will do plans.drop. So this is a basic, Pandas drop. It's a basic function in Pandas. And you have to, so this is really important. Labels and access. So labels are the label or list, right? Index or column labels to drop. And then axis here is important. Axis 0 is the row, is index for the row, and 1 is for columns. So if you want to drop a column, the axis needs to be 1. So the default is to drop rows, right? But if you want to drop a column, you have to re-index this as axis equals 1, right? So you can either specify labels or you can specify the column names, right? So I'm going to use column names. For when I drop a column, I'm going to use column names and axis equals 1 to drop. So I want to drop the column. Okay. Lastly, notice there's in place, right? And in place is false. We've talked about in place before. So if I run this with in place equals false, what it's going to do is return the table. It's going to actually return the whole table to me with that column dropped. But back in the memory, that column has not been dropped. Okay. So it's returning the data frame with that column drop, but it did not also take that object and resave that to the variable, right? So if you I want to drop a column and I want to save it, right? Then you have to change this in place to true. So let me just show you this real fast. Let's do drop and columns equals, right? And now again, it's going to be a list. So columns is a list, and I want to drop total. Remember, axis has to be 1. So if I just leave this alone, I think, did it do it? Okay, well, it figured it out. Oh, because I use columns, yeah. But so anyways, I guess if you use the columns, it knows that that you're talking about columns. Okay, so it dropped it. Now look at this. If I call plans back up, total is still there, right? So dropping, if you just call drop where the in-place parameter is false, it'll return a version of the table to you with that column drop, but it did not save it. Right? Because the reason why it does that is because often you'll do like, let's say I do plans 2, right? So I drop that column total and I save that as something else. Now that saved thing will not have the column drop, right? So here, if I run plans still has total, right? But if I look at plans 2 does not have total. Okay. So this is something you always have to be careful with pandas, is using the in-place parameter, right? When you're sorting things, when you're dropping things, if the in-place is false, right, it'll return a version of it to you, but it's not actually saving that. So but I don't want to save this as plans 2. I actually want to drop it and resave that to the original, right? So you could do it like this. You could either do it like that and just reassign it to itself. That works fine. Or you can change the in-place parameter to true. And now if you do this, it does not return a copy visually, but what it did is it saved over the old plans. And now if you look at plans, right, total is gone. So this in-place parameter, it occurs in several functions, and you have to double check, because a lot of times you won't be thinking about it, and you'll like run something and in-place will have been false, and you'll keep going, and then you realize, wait, it didn't save it, it didn't do it, right? Then you got to go back up and change the in-place to true, and then it'll, right? Okay, so that's how we drop a column. And let's drop some rows. Okay, so for example, I don't like these, let's say these aggregate rows down here, okay? So I don't like all these rows where the room type is null, okay? So if we look at the room type, how can I see rows where the rows are null? So this is plans.room type. There's a isNA function. So this is a function you can use on the series object. So if you run this, it'll give you all the rows where room type is null. There is not an alternative not NA function, right? So if you want all the rows where it's not null, you have to put this tilde, and that'll negate it, right? And then that'll give you all the rows where it's not null, right? So this is like a really common right. So we'll do this later more, but anyways, this is all the rows that are null, these 6 rows, and I want to drop these, right? So I think I can do plans drop labels. Does that work? I'll drop NA. Yeah, so here you can use drop NA, and then but you indicate here you indicate the row that you care about. So here drop NA, and then I just want to do, I think I just do room type. No, probably a list. If I don't figure this out right now, I'll show you next time. I'll figure it out next time. Okay. So yeah, so next time I'll show you how to drop rows. Okay, lastly, here's my database. It's like cleaned up quite a bit, right? I got rid of these, I got rid of the total column, right? Now let's say I want to export this as a data frame. I want to export this as an Excel file, right? So I'm gonna just write PD. Oh no, sorry. I write the name of the database, and then to Excel, and then the name of the file. So I'm going to call this plans, and I think that does it. That was it. Let me double check. To Excel. I think it's just to Excel. Ah, I think I forgot to put the, has to be XLSX. Yeah. Okay. Right. So here, remember when I opened the file, I didn't have a data frame yet. So there you use PD, right? You use the pandas object itself. So PD dot read underscore Excel, and then in quotes you have the name of the Excel file, right? Here, when you write it out, it's different. There's no PD here, right? It's the actual data frame itself. So this function, the writing function, is a function on the data frame. The reading function is a function on the pandas module itself, right? So they're a little bit different. So it's just the data frame to underscore Excel. There are actually several, like there are a bunch of these different functions, right? You can export to CSV, to Excel, like to other formats as well. To Excel plans, and then it has a lot of other parameters if you want to change them. But if we go to our folder now, here's now plans is here, and open it up, and that's not it. This is it. So this is the data frame, right, which I was manipulating in pandas. That this is how pandas save that data frame to Excel, right? And so this is always the first step, right? When you're dealing with raw data, the first step that I always do is I take that raw data, format it, whatever I have to do manually, right? And then open it up in pandas and just like change all the column names, change all the data types, like, you know, delete, remove, like everything that I want. And then I save that again as a separate Excel file, right? And then from every step after then, I don't use the original data anymore, right? I use plans. I use this data frame. So starting next week, we're gonna open up, you know, well, everything that we do is gonna be in this new clean Excel file, right? So, okay, all right, we'll stop here and I'll see you guys next week. You guys got any questions there on Zoom?
Yes, Professor. Can you help me, please, with my
Yeah,
question?
sure. I'm gonna stop recording now, and then I'll help you troubleshoot. Just stick around for just a second, okay?